Welcome to a topic analysis about Common Core standards, brought to you by Joshua Tabor, Bart Taylor, and Joe Yu.
We wanted to start by giving a little bit of background of what led to Common Core. There have been numerous educational initiatives from a variety of administrations, but two of the more recent ones, you've got the Goals 2000 Educate America Act, which passed during the Clinton administration, and then later that year, you also had the Improving America's School Act. Both of these were trying to develop an alignment of state standards that would then hopefully correlate to a certain level of performance. The one most of us are probably a little more familiar with, No Child Left Behind, under the Bush administration, also was trying to create a better standard at a state level, and they did this with specific grades in mind, and that also kind of led to a certain level of testing. We had to include the question, what is Common Core? A lot of us have maybe a passing familiarity with it, or we've even just heard it, and I know that that includes myself. That was why I wanted to select this as one of the topics. But I was actually really surprised that so many states are actually using Common Core as their basis, as to kind of align standards and lay out their curriculum. So I've given you a definition that I was able to find, and just so you can be familiar with it. One of the things that impressed me about Common Core as I read more about its evolution was how they started developing it. Instead of, politicians making decisions, you had a group of educators that worked together both in mathematics and in English language arts to develop something that hopefully would meet the needs of children as they prepare to enter the work world. What also I found interesting was as they were developing these standards and revising them, they were submitting them to feedback groups so they could figure out, okay, are we doing this right? Who are we not helping? You can kind of see in one of the quotes I put in here some of the different groups of teachers, higher education, civil rights, ELL, students with disabilities. So they were getting a variety of opinions as they were writing these standards. As they finished with the standards, they did appoint a validation committee to review and validate the work. Obviously, something of this magnitude is going to be challenged, so they wanted to make sure that they kind of followed the proper procedures. What I also found interesting about this, they appointed their validation committee, but they actually included four international experts from Australia, France, Taiwan, and the UK to also give input, which I thought was kind of interesting that they would try to draw from countries outside of ours. We've broken the next two slides into an English language arts and a mathematics portion. Um, a lot of people I've talked to about Common Core have said that they've heard that it's restrictive, and that's why Texas hasn't adopted it. But what I've read is that there are standards set forward, and you can see the four standards listed here. Um, but what I found interesting was beyond those four standards, the districts themselves can select what additional information they would like to teach. So there apparently is a decent amount of freedom going beyond these four topics. Now, I am not an English language arts teacher, so I don't know if this is something that is normally taught. I know America's founding documents are taught in the social studies realm, but I didn't know if the other three, if that's common in our curriculum. So maybe some of you that are English teachers could help us out there. These are the math standards laid out by Common Core. This is obviously a simplified version. With each standard, there's your standard kind of sentence that of the curriculum that they're looking to achieve with this. And it's the same thing with the English language arts. These are the basics. Where school districts want to go beyond this is up to them. We wanted to include this last bit kind of to reiterate that what we read in the Common Core is that it's not there to explain what you have to teach. It's just giving you a basis of what they're looking for, and then schools can build beyond that. The one thing we wanted to include that we found interesting was talking about who's going to manage the standards in the future, because obviously education is a state level institution. Um, I found it interesting that no federal funds were used to support the development Common Core, and any future they're not going to use federal funds. So I thought that was kind of interesting and a good way to keep state level standards separate from federal expectations, such as No Child Left Behind or whatever plan may be put forth in the future.
So, what are some implications for future in education on Common Core? For elementary and middle schools, implications for future in education with the Common Core state standards for English language arts, literacy, history, social studies, science, and technical subjects are: 1. Elementary students will be asked to read more challenging works at earlier ages, distill the meaning from different types of print and multimedia resources, and demonstrate comprehension by citing specific evidence from those texts when expressing their reasoning orally and in writing. Implications when compared students internationally and our students do significantly better in literature than they do when it comes to reading the kinds of texts you have to read in the workplace, says Timothy Shanahan, one of the writers of the Common Core for ELA and literacy. Around the world, this seems to be the reverse. Students in other countries tend to do better with the stuff that matters to them economically and in terms of their governance. So, to create greater balance, one of the chief focus points of the new Common Core standard is to improve American students' ability to closely read and build their knowledge from non fictional informational texts and to demonstrate their understanding by citing evidence from the texts themselves. The Common Core standards require a major shift. An equal balance between literary and informational texts in the elementary school years. The rationale for the shift is to both build students' vocabulary and general knowledge about the world and to improve their readiness for later studies. One of the big shifts in reading and writing instruction with the Common Core ELL standards is a greater emphasis on using text evidence to support or explain the reader's conclusions and inferences drawn from text. Evidence-based selective response. Students are asked to use evidence from a sample of informational text to answer a two-part multiple choice question. The close reading emphasized under the new Common Core ELA standards will help students learn how to use evidence and details from text to improve comprehension and reasoning. So, the Common Core is intentionally getting away from that lower memorization level and moving more toward a analytical level of thinking. Implications for high school students are that in a study by the CREST Center for Research on Evaluation Standards and Student Testing at the University of California, Los Angeles, found that the large majority of test items in most state assessments used in the past were low level and did not require much more than memory or low level thinking abilities, while the assessments now being developed are forecasted to contain many more higher level items aimed at deeper and more extensive analysis of information. So the emphasis on reading and working with multiple texts is a key part of Common Core high school goal. So some are some of the goals are for high school students to graduate and who are college and career ready, building the skills to read complex text and write well supported arguments. Common Core seeks to reduce the amount of remedial coursework that colleges have had to give first and second year students and reduce the amount of literacy training businesses have had to provide new workers.
There are a lot of myths versus facts about Common Core standards, so let's go through a few of the major ideas when it comes to the implementation from guiding laws or statutes. Myth: adopting Common Core standards means bringing all state standards down to the lowest common denominator, meaning that some states may think that they will be taking a step backwards. Fact: the standards are designed to build upon the most advanced current thinking that will prepare all students for success in college, career, and life. There has been an explicit agreement that no state will lower its standards. The standards were informed by the best in the country, the highest international standards, and evidence and expertise about educational outcomes. Myth: the standards will be implemented through No Child Left Behind, signifying that the federal government will be leading them. Fact: the Common Core is a state-led effort that is not part of No Child Left Behind or any other federal initiative. The federal government played no role in the development of the Common Core, and state adoption of the standards is in no way mandatory, just like currently, Texas still has not adopted the Common Core standards. Myth: these standards amount to a national curriculum for our schools. Fact: the Common Core is not a curriculum. It's a clear set of shared goals and expectations for what knowledge and skills will help our students succeed. Local teachers, principals, superintendents, and others will decide how the standards are to be met. Teachers will continue to devise lesson plans and tailor instruction to the individual needs of the students in their classrooms. Myth: the federal government will take over ownership of the Common Core State Standards Initiative. Fact: the federal government will not govern the Common Core standards. The Common Core was and will remain a state-led effort. States and local school districts will drive implementation of the Common Core. On March 27, 2015, the U.S. Senate passed an amendment barring the federal government from mandating, incentivizing, or coercing states to adopt specific academic standards, including the Common Core. In effect, the amendment, sponsored by Republican Senator David Vitter, is an attempt to end federal involvement in the Common Core standards. This legislation, called the Local Control of Education Act, would allow states to opt out of the national curriculum regime and related standardized tests without risking the loss of any federal funding.
I like the idea of Common Core. That's part of why I wanted to research it. I think having a common standard across the country is actually not a bad thing. Um, a level of generic standard of where we want all of our students to be when they graduate high school is a good thing. Where we go beyond that, I believe, should be a state level issue. If Texas wants to cover certain things more than Ohio does, then that's our right to do that. However, across the 50 states and territories, if you want to throw them in, we should be have a certain level of achievement that we are striving for. Um, the question is asked, what is there any way we can apply this to our district? And that's a little beyond my ability as a classroom teacher to apply, but I will be interested to see where we're headed with this, since there are only 7 states that have not adopted Common Core, and with a presidential election very quickly approaching, and one of the possible leading candidates in Jeb Bush being a big proponent of Common Core, I'll be kind of interested to see where this is going to go. If Bush wins, would that lead to a certain level of national standard that is similar to Common Core? So It's going to be interesting. If you haven't looked at Common Core, I do recommend just taking a quick glance at it, just so you can kind of see what it is. It was interesting to read about.
The Common Core standards have been implemented in 46 states and the District of Columbia, and some have implemented fully, or some are doing it incrementally, starting with different areas such as ELL. But these standards have not been tested, and we do not know what the outcome will be, and we can say it's an unknown new program at the same time. The Common Core were developed by an organization called Achieve and the National Governors Association, which was generously funded by the Gates Foundation. And another concern is that there was minimal public engagement in the development of these standards. The state of Kentucky piloted the Common Core, and proficiency rates dropped by 30%. And it's expected that we will be finding a lot of weight awakening, root awakening, and we might be setting a lot of students for failure, especially students with special needs or who are socioeconomically low. So is the bar of the Common Core realistic for our students? And last, Texas has not implemented the Common Core, along with the states of Virginia, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. So we do not know how this will affect for the state of Texas and the school districts where we are.
With the idea of a Common Core standard, it looks like education is back on board with the standards movement. This after being hijacked by No Child Left Behind, as Ravitch points out in the chapter 2 of her book, The Life and Death of the Great American School System. I fear that many will believe it to be a set of instructional guidelines and not just a framework for curriculum. But would this be the next big flop? Even an expert like Ravitch admitted to being on board with No Child Left Behind after the push of the standards movement. None of us knew how the effects of No Child Left Behind would unfold, and none of us will know how the Common Core will work either. Even us as budding doctoral students, we can analyze our expert opinions, but only time will tell. Thank you for your time and interest in the Common Core standards.